So, this video might actually end up being a bit of a hot take from me, guys. I'm half expecting to cop some pretty serious flack in the comment section for this one, but I welcome the conversation because we are about to throw some scrutiny on one of Delta Force's more highly rated features, the gunsmith system. For all of its pros and for how fun it is to fine-tune weapons to this degree in this game, I actually fear that the outcome of the system may be a problem for the game in the long run. G'day there once again viewers, your mate Kamikaze78 here, and today, let's do a bit of a deep dive as to why Delta Force's gunsmith system may be broken and how it turns the game into a point-and-click adventure, potentially to a fault. Okay, so by now folks, we should all have a pretty good idea as to how powerful this game's gunsmith actually is. I actually did a video recently that goes over some of my top builds to this date, and that's a video linked in a card in the top right for those who are yet to see it, but the general theme of that video was taking multiple weapons and turning them into absolute laser beams. Now, to a certain extent, you can do this with practically every weapon in the game that I've tried to date, and to illustrate this, I want to go through a couple of examples with you all now. On the left will be the default version of the weapon with me trying to control the recoil as best I can, and on the right, same deal, but a fully kitted build. Of course, we'll start off with the M4A1 here. Okay, and now the Scar H. Upping the ante once again, here's an AKM build. And for my final trick, none other than the Vector. As I said, folks, I think we could apply this to practically every weapon across the game right now, but you get the idea, but we would be here otherwise all day. But now comes the part where I act like an old grandpa screaming at the kids who are having fun on his lawn, because a lot of us really celebrated the freedom that you could get your hands on with this gunsmith system when the game first came out. Because let's be real here, who doesn't like spending hours crafting the perfect build when it feels this impactful? It also feels fun. It feels fun building weapons that are just this damn effective. However, I think we've also just illustrated in one swift move here why every game prior to Delta Force has had limits on its attachment count per loadout. Now, to be clear, I am talking about FPS games that operate in the non-extraction shooter market. I am very aware that things like Tarkov exist that are just porn for gun assembling nuts out there. But in the, I'm going to say, arcade shooter space, attachment limits were enforced to ensure that players can't just, completely build over all of the shortcomings of a weapon as it comes out of the box. I mean, sure, in other games you could do that to a certain extent, but it meant that you were sacrificing on improving on the good elements of your weapon in the process. But given just how many attachments you can run in Delta Force, you can really balance out the shortcomings on a weapon and take the strengths to the next level. In most other games, that's a choice you need to make, and therein lies the problem with Delta Force's gunplay right now. And with that, we do catch ourselves in a bit of a dilemma here with the game, and not an easy one to fix. The gunsmith system and the outcomes that you can get out of it can range from downright stupid fun to absolutely menacing. And it is fun as hell going down that journey of working out what you can and can't get out of every weapon in the game. It makes the weapon progression feel impactful and rewarding, and I catch myself wanting to work through all of the guns in the game just to see what kind of wacky combinations I can come up with. It's one of the reasons that I'm so addicted to Delta Force, and that positive that the system brings to the overall gameplay loop can't be downplayed. And I don't want today's video to do that either, so as I get into the problems with the system here, guys, just note that I do appreciate the system for what positives it does bring to the game as well. But this is also where I say that I think some grounding or tuning needs to be done here with the system to ensure that players don't have the freedom to literally build the balance out of the game entirely using the gunsmith system. As we've seen with so many other games out there, the moment you give your players the freedom to balance the fun or skill curve out of your game in search of the most efficient way to win, they will. And the amount of freedom that Delta Force affords its players, man, we are walking a damn fine line with a lot of the weapon builds that I've seen so far in the alpha test. Shit, I would dare argue that we've stepped over that line a couple of times now. And to be clear here, I'm not blaming the players for taking advantage of the freedom that is given to them. It's the system in the game that's at fault here. And to be fair, we should only expect players to abuse what is given to them at the very least. I mean, I'm doing it as we speak with the likes of the Scar H in the background gameplay, as I pointed out earlier, and I've got no regrets whatsoever, but the fact that I can take a Scar H and beam a dude at 100 meters plus with perfect accuracy and very little input from me to control the recoil is frankly wild gameplay that is going to be incredibly frustrating to deal with as more and more people gain access to these kinds of builds. Now, before anyone freaks out here, I'm not planning on suggesting that we need to dial back the freedom itself of the gunsmith system per se. I like being able to equip as many attachments as I want and have that freedom to build those kinds of weapon builds. It's one of the defining things about Delta Force. But I do think we need to shift the conversation to having a chat about the intensity of the attachments and how they can impact your weapon. On their own, they aren't too bad, but in aggregate, once they start compounding effects together, they can and will turn weapons into absolute demons that definitely step into the overpowered territory, especially as you progress through the levels of the game and become a higher level player. Now, this has a couple of really distinctive impacts on the game's gunplay right now. For one, it completely circumvents any kind of skill curve that comes from engaging targets at range in particular, turning the guns into laser beams that require practically no input from the player to manage properly does completely eliminate the skill curve from this game. And for two, it creates a disproportionate effect on the effective ranges in which high-level players with high-level weapon builds can engage targets versus new players with low-level weapon builds. That second one to me is actually of biggest concern, and it's partly in response to something that I expect to see in the comment section down below. Something along the lines of, well, Cammy, if everyone is overpowered, then no one is. It's not like that this is something that you'll have to pay to unlock or anything like that. Literally, everyone can do this. What's the problem? And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, that's where we run into the problem here. A player like myself, with a max rank weapon loadout, can basically take aim and engage a target who, if they're running a lower level setup, will be simply muscled out of a fight entirely, no questions asked. Zero ability to counter-engage whatsoever. Now, obviously, a skill factor applies here, and there are always going to be exceptions to that very general statement. But for the sake of the argument, any poor sod rocking a level 20 Scar H build with attachments that are of less quality versus the Giga Sweat rocking a max rank build is going to lose 9 times out of 10 on the sheer basis that their gun is much more of a handful to control versus Mr. Giga Sweat. And no, this is not an issue that's exclusive to Delta Force, I'll give you that much, but this is definitely the FPS that I have seen where the high tier loadouts and what you can accomplish with them pales in comparison to most of the out-of-the-box equivalents or the low-level weapon builds. And that is a problem when it comes to new player versus high-skilled player or long-term player interactions in this game potentially. The fact that time spent, irrespective of player skill, may determine the outcome of a fight before the fight even occurs. From a broader gameplay flow perspective as well, it also really pushes out the average engagement distances of this game something fierce. Players with these max rank loadouts are going to hold the ability to just sit back and demolish people in low risk playstyles. Of course, they're going to opt to take this approach because it means more success. That also has the flow-on effect of really slowing down the pace of this game and making people simply feel afraid to push out and keep the game moving. All I will say right now is that thank God this game has opted to implement some pretty harsh damage drop-offs for a few weapon categories and weapon types out there. It really has done wonders in limiting just how deadly some weapons actually are at those extended distances, because otherwise I fear we'd see nobody making pushes in this game whatsoever. But ultimately, guys, yes, I acknowledge that the game's gunsmith system is incredibly fun to work with here, and I like how impactful it feels. My selfish side says that that needs to stay in the game. But on the other side of the coin, the level of impact it can have here when you really min-max the stats can feel a bit cheesy at times. Like, it strips some of the character from the guns of the game and turns them into point-and-click adventures. So, in my opinion, I think there needs to be some work done on looking at how powerful these attachments are in aggregate, potentially fine-tuning how impactful each attachment is, and more focusing on them being a small cog in the bigger picture of a weapon loadout when you combine them all together. When it comes to building a gunsmith system, you can either have single attachments being powerful but limiting the amount that you can add per weapon, or have an unlimited amount out there but limit their power individually. At least that's how it works in my view. And I think that Delta Force gives the best of both worlds right now, which has some potentially really crappy implications on the game more broadly. I think there's a chance here that it will generate a very far gap in what the capabilities are of a new player and a veteran player. Even if it's a very new but very high-skilled first-person shooter player, they're still going to be on the short end of the stick just by virtue of weapon loadouts and weapon builds. And I do think that is something worth addressing in the future when it comes to Delta Force's current gunsmith system. But that's all of my thoughts, and I'm very keen to hear yours in the comment section down below, folks. If you got this far in the video, well, you either enjoyed it or you're just absolutely seething at my opinion here. So like the video if you enjoyed it, or give the video a downvote if you didn't, out of spite. Either way, I appreciate it. And if you guys want to see more Delta Force and just first-person shooter content from me more broadly, then go ahead and subscribe to the channel as well. It'd be great to have you guys a part of the community. Once again, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Peace out, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Take care, guys. Have a good one.